Hello, everybody, and welcome to Art House Rewind. Happy Wednesday to you. My name is Matt. I'm the executive director at Art House, and tonight I'm joined by our creative director at Art House, Brian Ostrike, and then we have an incredibly special guest. I hope you all have your shirts tucked in and your ties on tight because we are so honored to have Mr. Ryan Kayberry join us for our conversation tonight. Ryan was our original operations director and manager here at Art House for the first 2 years. Good friend, great guy, and I can't wait to not only have him as a part of this conversation, but just catch up with him as we move on. So, Mr. Kayberry, thanks for being a part of this.
Thanks for having me, Matt. I'm just tickled to be here.
I love it. Hey, before we jump into it tonight, we are wanting to shout out continually those sponsors that continue to help Art House and the Babcock Theater exist in Billings, Montana. You are the reason that we can go through this shutdown and continue to feel confident in our ability to open, hopefully very, very soon. So all of our business sponsors, individuals, and organizations, thank you, thank you, thank you. Tonight, we want to give a special shout out to Ronnie Kuzma with RBC Wealth Management. Ronnie, you have been a sponsor with us for a couple years now, and we're so grateful for your continual support of the work we're doing here in Billings. Gentlemen, tonight we are talking about this little film that is, I just love it on so many levels. Nobody's surprised by that because I seem to love everything, it seems. But we're talking about the film, The Death of Stalin. And so as usual, Mr. Ostrike, what do we need to know about this film? Go.
All right, so this is, of course, The Death of Stalin. It came out 2017, kind of late in 2017 in Britain, so it took a little bit to get over stateside here. It is directed by Armando Iannucci. He was mostly a television director before this. He's mostly known for things like he was one of the co-creators of Alan Partridge, who's sort of a British personality played by Steve Coogan, and it's been going from about 94 until they did a movie on him in 2013. So he's been off and on that since 1994. He also did his own Armando Iannucci shows in 2001. He started as a stand-up comedian before getting into television writing, but probably made his biggest impact with The Thick of It, which is a political satire about British Parliament. It ran from 2005 till 2009, and then kind of ended with a movie, In the Loop, which kind of had some of those characters cross over into this movie that was a bit of a satire about the Bush-Blair era of U.S.-British relationships. And, it's a very funny film if you get a chance to see it. I know a lot of people didn't get to see that, but I've seen it twice now, and I absolutely love it. And then, of course, that kind of segued into him creating Veep, which ran from 2012 till 2019. Of course, that was a really loved show on HBO with Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and definitely check that one out as well if you like political satire. Since then, he was going to have a film come out this summer, The Personal History of David Copperfield, which is sort of a retelling of the Charles Dickens tale. That's been pushed back till fall, it looks like now, so we'll see how that turns out. And in the meantime, he also has another television show on HBO, Avenue 5, which is sort of a science fiction satire as well. So he's a great guy. This, of course, stars Steve Buscemi as Nikita Khrushchev, Jeffrey Tambor as Malenkov. Also some appearances by great British actors like Michael Palin from the Monty Python crew, and Jason Isaacs, and also Simon Russell Beale as Berea. And he was one that kind of stole the show for me as just being so ruthlessly cutthroat. So, yeah. Great cast, great director.
So we didn't get this film here at Art House till 2018. It was beginning of 2018 when it started to get released in the U.S. And for us at Art House, I was so excited to bring this film in because I was and am a fan of Veep, and the connection obviously to Veep made me incredibly excited. And this was one of those films. Ryan, you were on staff at the time. I'm not sure about you, but you get to watch a lot of trailers over and over and over again at Art House because you get the film started and you kind of stay upstairs making sure that things are okay before you head to the office. this was one of those trailers. Every time it came on, I'm like, I'm fine to watch this trailer over and over and over
Mm-hmm.
again. I just, you see certain scenes over again, and it just every time it's just great. And this was one of those for me. So this film is number 68 all time. So Art House has been open for 5 years, and
60. Wow.
number 68. So that's pretty good. We have over 300 films that we've shown in the last 5 years. So 68 isn't too bad by any means. But
That's
I
cool.
remember really, really enjoying this film. Ryan, do you have any memories of when this film came to Art House, or things about when it played there, people's reactions to it, those kinds of things?
I certainly do. Yeah, I remember being somewhat sensitive to that. Being married to a Russian myself, I didn't pay the movie quite enough attention on the first watch. Well, the first few watches, I did enjoy the trailer like you did. Its irreverence and whatnot, but I'm learning that I don't know much about satire. And after watching it again in preparation for this conversation, I definitely saw it from a different point of view this time, and not just everybody laughing at Russians because they killed a lot of people, I guess. I mean, it's just like, well, this stuff isn't funny. Why are we laughing? But it is. It's the only way to really handle it sometimes. And I really am enjoying getting to know satire a little more. And on rewatching this, I obviously I see it quite different now, and I'm thankful for this type of content. I really am.
Yeah. Did you watch Veep at all, Ryan?
I watched enough to know that I really enjoyed it, but I didn't quite. I don't have HBO, so it was like on somebody else's account, kind of a thing. And
okay,
I want to get into it further. I'm really interested in the writing of Iannucci. I think he's and directing, but as a screenwriter, I think he's really talented, undoubtedly.
Yeah, the reason I bring up Veep is because I was in the same boat. I think when it comes to satire, that I hadn't experienced much of it, and I started watching Veep, and like the whole first series or the whole first season, I just wasn't into it because everybody was so bad. I was just like, what? I don't know who to root for. Everybody I want to root for ends up being horrible, and not
Tony Hale. Not Buster.
No, not Buster. And but after watching that for it was about the second season that something flipped in me. That's like, again, maybe my ignorance, but satire. Here's what's happening here, and now I can lean into it a little more. Than just that.
It takes a commitment. I think it really does. As a writing, I think it takes a commitment, which is a challenge. I think it's an extra challenge for those who dare to tread the waters of satire.
Yeah.
Because it can be offensive. Am I right? It can be just offensive.
Oh, for sure.
If you want it to be. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, whether it's Veep or even this film or other satires out there, they're not worried about, the good guys, bad guys, or people coming out on top, or, the traditional narratives and stories that we're used to in films. They're kind of making fun of everybody all the time for everything. Yeah. And that's the point. And, that's not the most common thing to interact with in story, I think.
No, yeah. I might have to move a bit here. Hi, Sal. Say hi to Matt. There's Stalin.
Hey, buddy. We're getting a tour of Ryan's apartment. This is beautiful. I love it.
Okay.
Brian, do you have any thoughts on satire before we kind of move this train along, since we derailed it for that conversation?
Not really. I like a good one when I see it, but I don't really have any strong emotions on what makes a good one or what's, but I enjoy it when I see it. So.
I like it. So this film had a $13 million budget, approximately, is what people are saying. And it made about $24 million worldwide. It was originally, and still is, to my knowledge, banned in Russia because of their belief that this was poking a lot of fun at Russia and Russians, which was Ryan's thing from the beginning. So Ryan was onto something, maybe. Yeah. But this film, I think, did hit a nerve with critics. It did really, really well critically. People seem to really love it. And I think we're able to lean into what the film was trying to do. Gentlemen, anything on the production, how the film was made, that you would love to kind of point out and talk about?
So besides the being banned in Russia, which even though it was banned, I read some statistics that approximately at the time when it was in theaters, approximately 58% of the Russian population had said that they would have watched the film had the ban been lifted, because it still was sparking interest. And even before, so they banned it after the cultural ministry had reviewed the film and decided to ban it. That was only a couple days before it was released, so a couple theaters actually ended up showing it anyway, claiming that they didn't get the word that it had been banned. So whether that's true or not, maybe they wanted to, subvert things or whatever. But those theaters were sued in the process of screening that banned film. So there was that. And the other little things of note, one thing that most people notice right away is how this is a film that takes place in Russia, and yet no one not only is speaking Russian, but they also are not speaking any sort of accent. They're not attempting an accent, and even like Steve Buscemi has his accent, and the British actors have their accent. Like it's sort of a melting pot of wherever you're from, that's the accent you're speaking, which is I thought was fun in the sense that it's not trying to subvert you into thinking that this is a documentary by any chance, and also just a little bit of adding to the satire that this could really happen anywhere. This is politics, and politics happen pretty much the same everywhere. And it also reminds you a little bit again of of the Monty Python sketches where whether they're in Spain, whether they're wherever, they're just speaking their own language. So
yeah. And I think it helps with for the comedy, because some of those lines are improvised and those kinds of things, and so they wanted to create space for the actors to be able to improvise and not have to worry about improvising an accent on top of those kinds of things, or for the accents to just come off horrible. Which there's a lot of bad Russian accents out there in films, I'm sure, and so this allowed the film to live in its own unique space and be more than just kind of a Russian history telling, I think, which I found fascinating and interesting.
And to its credit too, I also can see where watching this thing with everyone speaking the accent, a period piece like that, it starts to feel a little bit like a stuffy period drama, like Gary Oldman as in The Darkest Hour or something, and it kind of gives it more heaviness of weight. And it's like if we just cut all that out, then it kind of really cuts through all that to be a lot more comedic.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that if you're a history buff, you're going to notice a lot of things in this film that obviously, one, we weren't in the room, so we don't know exactly how things went down. And two, there's a lot of timing of certain things happening or how certain things happen that the film takes some liberties with, that it kind of truncates, what was really years of movement within Russia and politics and government, those kinds of things. It truncates it down to about a week, essentially, of all of these things happening. But I bring that up as I think that the film does a good job of trying to stay somewhat pointed towards history. It doesn't go, incredibly crazy and just skyrocket into a space that's like, wait a second, that didn't happen. There's certain elements that did happen and potentially even happened that way, but they happen in a different order with different, players involved with those kinds of things. So, Ryan, that's a lovely restroom you have.
I know.
Yeah,
I'm loving this tour of the house in every room.
The wine cellar is next. I can't wait.
It doesn't take long. There's only one left. Yeah, we'll end up in the garage. Trust me. I thought that was interesting. Watching the part that Anya and I were able to watch together today, she did kind of allude to that you were speaking of, Matt, when she said, when just during the first the opening scene, essentially when they're kind of wanting the recording of the concerto, so he's back in the room and he's getting everybody to sit down again. She's like, yeah, this seems totally like it could have happened. Totally. Yeah, this is right on par with the kind of stories that they heard of. But I think that's the funny thing about satire. We don't know how correctly Russia really reported any of this, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of, like, even the stuff that is known during those times seems so, they were trying to protect each other in a lot of different ways. And so it's like satire is the best version, because it's like, well, imagine this happened. Wouldn't that be kind of funny, sad and funny at the same
Yeah.
time? It's a freedom, certain freedom. I'm
Yeah, you
glad they
can talk
took it.
about bigger things and not get lost in the details. Because
Yeah,
if it was a documentary or a true to life drama with just a little
right.
humor sprinkled in, all of a sudden you're worried about the details and maybe missing out on the bigger message of
Yeah,
what's going on.
yeah. Good point.
So I think this film, from a production standpoint, is just impeccably made. I've never
Mm-hmm.
been to Russia, but I definitely felt like they worked really hard to, even the different funeral processions and the viewing and those kinds of things. Like they did a lot of good work. It felt like, to feel
Oh,
like, as someone that hasn't been to Russia, it felt like, oh yeah, this all makes sense, and is it
yeah.
making fun of it? I never felt like it was ugly or gross, or they were, belittling the country as a whole, but it just felt like, for a satire, they could have potentially, downgraded some of those things and, done
Yeah,
cheaper
and
things, but they weren't.
I thought they also were very tasty with how they chose to design, or they had good staff to help them. It felt exactly like Russia. I didn't pay attention to the credits to find out how much of it was truly in Russia, but so much of that area over there looks a lot like the Russia that I've been to, because it was it was USSR. I'm not sure how. Again, it's probably about taxes and where they can film and get the most sort of incentive. But I thought they did a great job of being respectful to the
I
Russian.
read a lot of it as being, maybe more critical or making fun of certain characters in Russian history, like Khrushchev or even Stalin's son and Stalin himself to a degree. I think there was a lot of making fun of those characters, but it still managed to be more or less sympathetic to the Russian people. A lot of the times, you watch this power struggle between the characters themselves, but when you see, the actual people that are affected by their politics, like it actually comes off much more sympathetic of, these
Much
people
more.
that were under one regime and then suddenly regime change, and they're just trying to live their lives, and suddenly they're either being attacked or being let go or being whatever, and it's
Yeah.
I love that the opening scene that you mentioned, Ryan, with the concerto, when they have to fill the hall, and so they just get people off the street.
The peasants, yeah.
And they're just sitting there. One of them's like knitting something, the other one's eating something out of a jar.
eating
And they're just
pickled eggs.
pickled eggs, yeah. And it's everything. I think it's what you're pointing to, Brian. Like, they're just going about their life, and someone just dragged them off the street into this, and they're not like, yay, they're just like, all right, I guess this is what I'm doing tonight, kind of thing. And I just loved it.
But it also, I love that opening scene, in that the director of that theater, essentially, you can see the fear that, like, this hasn't been recorded, and I can't say no, like, I have to make this happen, sort of thing. And with very little said, it really gives the real life implications of how fearful these people are, that Stalin asked for something and we cannot end it. And even once he does deliver it, the guards make a point to say, like, this is late, it will be noted.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a regime right there. Yeah, that was a little bit for me, the respectful, seeing those peasants come in there and into that first scene, seeing the peasants come in and really seeing and trying to imagine, like, okay, so they've just been pulled off the street that or wherever they've been pulled from, that they haven't wanted to be forever, and they're wondering if this is ever going to end, and now they're just here to see a concerto, and they don't even get to enjoy it because whatever, they've been under so much for so long. I think that was a really telling thing on the second watch, or I guess this would be probably about my fifth watch, truthfully, but my first intentional watch, maybe. I was really impressed by it.
Yeah, and even the director's comment, not the conductor, but the guy that's trying to get everything going, and his comment that these people have never even heard Mozart or don't even know who Mozart is. Like, they're looking down on them for this, when these people are like, I just loved it, because they almost felt like the seat of power, these peasants did in that moment. Like,
right.
I'm not playing your. I'm here, but I'm also not gonna play your stupid game and tuck in my shirt and pretend like this is the greatest thing ever. Like, I'm just trying to live, dude. Like, I
Yeah.
just thought it was a well done moment for sure.
I think it's cool that you picked up on it too, because after traveling to Russia for a couple times, that's really the people that you're impressed by, are those like Anya's grandmother who went through this time, and she doesn't really want to talk about it, but you know she's been through some stuff that you wouldn't want to see yourself, and it's just she still wants to welcome you into her home, and she still wants you to eat all of her smelly food, and it's just like these are the people that really matter, and he showed him in that first little bit of that movie, and that I thought that was really cool, man.
Yeah. So any other production tidbits, or should we jump into the spoiler section of things and talking about what we loved and maybe spoil some things for people? Okay. So if you haven't seen the film, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be moving into a conversation that might spoil some things for you. So for whatever reason, this film is streaming on Netflix, so I would encourage you to check it out, or you can just get things spoiled for you. As I mentioned, they do stay somewhat consistent with history. So, you know, if you know history, you're going to know a lot of the things that we talked about. We might spoil some comedy and different things like that for you. But as we jump into the spoiler area of things, Brian, I'll start with you. What for you would you say is your best scene or moment, the thing that jumps out to you as one of your favorites from this film?
Gosh, I mean, there's so many moments, like little moments, not even scenes, that stand out for me as being so wonderful. But I'd say the one scene that I remembered the most, you know, having been a couple years removed from seeing it and watching it again now, I just remember the process of them deciding to move Stalin's body from that carpet to the bed where he'd be, you know, laid out a little bit more ceremoniously. And I mean, especially because he was laying in urine at that spot, and multiple times characters come in to, you know, pay their respects to him, and they're kneeling, and they were, oh gosh, I mean, the satire around that, but also just the process of these men deciding to move this. And then I just remember the visual I remember the most is them going to lay him on the bed, and there's this one guy who's just leaning way far back as the body just rolls over him, and it's just, visually I just love that. I mean, I love visual humor like that, you know, universally you don't have to speak any language, you can just recognize the ridiculous of this process. And that was the one moment before I had rewatched it that I remember just sticking out the most. So
yeah, there are all these guys that are trying to pay their respects, trying to hold their level of honor. I mean, Buscemi's in his PJs with a suit on top of his PJs.
Yeah.
Like, everybody's still trying to be a dignitary on some levels, but at the same time, like, this is a hilarious, ridiculous situation. And
it's somehow it feels like they're all just putting on a show for each other.
Yeah.
About how they actually feel, right?
Yeah, they all kind of are doing this symbolic gesture of grieving, but at the same time in the back of their head they're all thinking like, okay, what are my next steps? How do I advance my career with this and stuff like.
And the whole time they're just positioning each other to be the first one to get somewhere. They'll be the first one to greet his daughter or his. Yeah, it's and all of those scenes were pretty telling to me too.
And the quotes that they pull, that they try to sound so poetic in that, oh, this is how it's going to be written in the history book sort of thing, and it's like,
oh yeah, man, I wish I could remember some of those off the top of my head. Those are great. Yeah. I remember really admiring the scene. That pretty stressful point. Or Brian, were you done? Am I interrupted?
Oh no, you're good.
Okay. There's a scene where the pianist is coming back for I think it's for the funeral, right? Is she?
Well,
is that where she comes back?
Yeah,
for the viewing. Yeah, she comes back, and then I mean, he's leading her down the hallway. Remind me, Beria's leading her down the hallway, and then he kind of clues her in that he still has that note that she left for Stalin. Do you remember the scene I'm talking about? And he's like, there's so many notes in this thing, and just like the one you left Stalin. I thought that was beautifully done, because she had just talked to Buscemi about teaching his little niece, I think, piano or something like that. And like those connections and how that kind of played out. I thought that was just a beautiful moment in that, how that movie really, I mean, I was so confused by Berea. I remember watching this film multiple times even, because his character is fascinating. And Brian, you alluded to his performance as an actor, and I think that was really a highlight of the whole film for me.
Yeah.
Was how far he took me in multiple directions, really, with his performance.
Yep. Yeah, and the way that, I mean, that letter and the connection with Buscemi's niece and all of that stuff, like the way that plays out in the story, as far as everybody's working to have something on everybody else, you know, good or bad, and you don't want to be on anybody's list, or you don't want to let anybody have anything on you, and all of a sudden now, like the way they turn that plot device into, all of a sudden Berea has something against Buscemi, you know, that I know you're connected with this, and so now you're connected to her, and she wrote this letter, so I can come after you, so you be careful. Like, it's crazy, and I did not see that connection coming at all until the film, you know, introduces it, and it really is a little kind of subplot in some ways, but it's showing that, I think, really well.
That scene with Berea in Stalin's chambers being the first one there, that was really telling and really well done. Of obviously who he was as a person, despite where they tried to have you believe about him later on in the film and whatnot. But there was, I'm really impressed.
Yeah. For me, there's probably two scenes that jump out, and one of them is just the comedic effect of the scene. And I was telling you guys before we went live, this one, but the scene in the hockey rink, just everything about that scene, where you have these players on the ice that are not hockey players. You have people that are trying to coach that are not necessarily coaches. And there's just all these statements of play on, get it, give it, hit it, play better. Like, it's just, and that's the coaching, and it's just a mess of what's happening. So I just love that whole interaction. I love the interaction of the plane that went down that ended up killing
what plane?
Yeah. What plane? No, it didn't.
What plane?
And that's a real thing that happened. It didn't happen, I think, I can't remember, 1954 or something. It was a few years afterwards. But the way they bring in that history to just the culture, the potential culture, I would say, of how you can treat some of those things in a totalitarian state, like that. All of a sudden, what plane? It didn't go down. And it's just really, really, really great. And I love the comedy of that scene on so many levels. So that's definitely up there. My other favorite scene, yes, for comedic effect, but also maybe just real world life connection. The first time that the committee is together and they're deciding what's next, and they have to take votes, and there's motions on the table, and here's the motion, and there's the lines of like, I don't even know what we're voting on, because there's two motions, but it's one vote. And the way they always just wait for, Brian was just doing it, like hands, and it passes unanimously.
Unanimous.
Like, just waiting for the hands to go out. And I just love it, again, because of the comedy, but also like the number of meetings that I've been in that obviously are much different than this reality, but that, you know, have this feel of like, I don't even know what we're voting on. I don't even know what's going on. But it just feels like everybody's like, oh, I guess this is what we're doing now. And this is the choices that we're making, when, you know, we're supposed to be at a table as a board or organization, whatever, to really kind of wrestle through these things. You just get through it, and it's unanimous. Okay, next one. And I just thought it was played so well. And Jeffrey Tambor does such a good job of playing that role of kind of, he's got a little bit of lovable to him, but he's pretty dim-witted. And I mean, he just plays the character that it seems he plays a lot, for sure. But he does such a good job of it. So those would be some of my favorite scenes for sure.
Those such great scenes. Yeah. I wanted to ask Brian, if I could quickly, Brian, that so much of this comedy reminded me of Arrested Development. And I know you've worked on Arrested Development, and maybe it was just because of Jeffrey Tambor, but was Arrested Development fairly satirical too, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, they were definitely, it was more of a satire of, you know, wealthy American families,
sure,
in that sense. But yeah, it's, you know, I wasn't really in any sort of development stage or anything on those.
Right.
I was in post-production, so everything was pretty much done by that point. But
Yeah,
yeah, I
I'm
mean, Jeffrey
surprised.
Tambor, I think, is great at these kind of roles, and this, and even going back to Larry Sanders, like he's very much great at sort of being the lovable buffoon,
Yeah.
and you know the way that you can see that he is more or less being set up to be this puppet that is going to just be,
Yeah.
you know, do whatever Berea says of him is so great. And yeah, you can kind of see a little bit of George Senior in that as well. So.
Mm-hmm. And Oscar, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think his, again, I don't necessarily know the history of it, but the way that he's played in Death of Stalin, like this idea that he really is probably more on point with what should be happening on some levels than anybody else, but because of the influence of all these other people at the table, he's continually moved here and there. And even the way they continue to dress him and make fun of the way that he's dressed, but like he's literally trying his best. You can through the whole film, that's all he's trying. Even the grenade joke with the tomato in the beginning of the movie, where he, you know, hey, yeah, and everybody's just like, what? And then he just moves on. It's great. And I think,
and of course, probably his most, I mean, again, kind of going back to the George Senior thing of when it's, oh yeah, no problem. Oh, I meant no problem. I love it.
Yeah, and how I remember him being so excited when Berea talks about possibly postponing some of the killings and postponing some of the arrests, and like Jeffrey Tambor's face just lighting up. And that was such a cool moment for me. Like, yeah, this guy's probably, he's a good hamster stuck in a bad wheel, you know?
So, gentlemen,
Tyler Murphy on Facebook wanted to comment of how, having read Berea's Wikipedia page, he wants to chime in of how accurately this really depicts basically the whole circumstances leading to his death as well. So
yeah, it's one of those things where probably fact is much stranger than any, or maybe more sad than any, you know, fiction we could come up with.
Mm-hmm. Which thank you, Tyler, and I think is a great segue, Tyler, potentially into our nitpicks section. And the reason I think it's a great segue is, for me, I don't know how else you do it. It's the nature of satire. It's what we've been talking about over and over and over again. But particularly for me, the second time I watched it, you know, the killing of Berea at the end of the film, it's heavy. Like it struck me much heavier the second time. And knowing that this is, you know, connected on some levels to history, and, you know, he didn't get a trial or anything like that. They just rushed through this process to kill him. Yes, he's a horrible guy. And so there's this part of you that's like, yes, this needs to happen. But then simultaneously, like, but this is just more of the same thing that was grotesque through the whole film. That was awful. And so, yes, it's satire, and I understand that. And even the first time watching the film, I remember when they're walking down the halls of the prisons and you just hear these gunshots, you know, that are happening. And, you know, like, it's almost played for comedy potentially of like how these killings are happening. But at the same time, like, this is connected to reality. Like, this isn't just a goofball, yuck kind of thing. This is heavy stuff. And like you, Ryan, being conflicted a little bit. And I don't know if that's a nitpick on the film, but that was I mean, especially the second time, that was a thing for me that, yes, it's hilarious and it has so much to it, but man, that's a big deal and a heavy deal. And so, you know,
yeah, it definitely it definitely takes those turns where it, you know, is lighthearted, so laugh out loud, hilarious in so many parts, but it definitely will take a serious turn when it needs to just be like, hey, we're laughing at the ridiculous of the situation, and yet these have real world implications that, you know, that are heavy, that are sad.
Ryan, I think you might be muted, my
I
friend.
think he's muted, yeah.
And now he went away.
Here comes I think that's my biggest. I mean, Matt, I totally agree, and Brian, that's my biggest dig on satire. But that's, I think, again, only my inability to kind of allow myself to feel simultaneously really sad and laugh.
Yeah,
That's a hard thing for our body to figure out, I think.
Yeah.
But that's what satire does such a good job of pushing us towards, because that's it seems like that's a recipe for neutrality. And in a story, I think neutrality is almost required of us to engage with it. That's what I've been trying to do in movies, at least, like really try and watch some stuff that challenges me to stay neutral despite its content, because that's where I think you're moved towards new ideas or a revelation of emotion, maybe even just that. But I think it's important, and that's why I'm a new fan of satire, no doubt.
and I think this was before the broadcast started, but we were talking about Jojo Rabbit as another satire, and Taika Waititi, the director and writer of that film, multiple interviews have heard him say, like, this was so horrible. Jojo Rabbit's about World War II, specifically a Hitler character in the film. And like, for him, satire is about you. What else are you going to do but laugh? Like, when it's something is so horrendous and awful, there's a place that laughter might have in the midst of that, essentially. And I think that's what this film is doing as well. And so I think there is something to be said about satire on that level.
Yeah, I applaud it. I really do. It's a big endeavor.
Yeah. Any other nitpicks you guys would have or point at, things that just didn't connect for you as well, didn't work for you when you watched it, or other than that, it was pretty great?
Personally, I just say it took me a while, but now I think it's all pretty great. The stuff like the language, like why couldn't they find Russian actors? It's obvious why they couldn't find Russian actors, because Russia didn't want it. But is like that kind of stuff. And then hearing you guys say, like, that actually opens up the narrative to anybody. If you're just listening to people speak their language, and then, they're not you, you can't just blame the Russians. I really, now that I think I've finally matured enough to appreciate this movie. That's not saying much, but I really do think that this movie helped educate me on this whole genre. Well, this
Brian,
one, Jojo Rabbit. Jojo was, that's a tough one. That one, there was a couple points where it's just like, and I think Brian was alluding to this as well. In satire, they'll take you from laughing to just spin it right there in your seat, and you're just like, what? And those moments are, I think, once again, I think they're really important, and I applaud them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I didn't have any specific nitpicks on this one. I didn't, and this is me personally, I didn't quite feel the connection with Stalin's son that I feel like they were going for. There was, both his son and his daughter. I kind of, I felt like if those characters were not there, it wouldn't have changed my experience of the film that much.
We wouldn't have got the hockey scene.
Except the hockey scene.
I respectfully disagree.
Yeah. Yeah. I felt like there was a lot of weight on what do we do with these people that I just never quite got the connection with.
Yeah.
And I think, even the way the film ends with the daughter being sent to Vienna, like, I guess I can agree with you, Brian, that from a story standpoint, they're trying to vie for their approval and all that stuff. And the minute they don't need it anymore, they're just, even more secondary characters than they already were on some levels, for sure. I could see that. Yeah. But I like the hockey scene. And even the scene when they're trying to meet her for the first time, and they're rushing down. Like, that's a great scene. No. You want to strip a movie of all of its best scene.
Oh yeah, that's so great to watch them run. And Steve Buscemi, I think, still has his pajamas on under his suit.
and the line of, how can you plot a takeover and run at the same time? Good line. I like it. So, gentlemen, we've kind of hinted at some of these things, but I'm really curious where you would say, from a satire standpoint, moving into what's it all about? What would you say are the big things that, obviously this film is pointing at history, the absurdities of some things that were taking place in history. But what are some of the larger things that you would walk away from and say that this film is trying to communicate to?
Brian, do you want to go?
Yeah. So I I probably need to watch it some more. I remember when I first watched it in 2018, definitely recognizing that this is coming out on the heels of a very strange year in both British and United States politics. Britain with Brexit and U.S. with one of the strangest elections we've had with this change of power and I remember walking away feeling that this is some sort of commentary on, not only the process. Again, everyone's speaking their own language, and there's sort of this idea that politics are politics no matter what part of the world you're in. And with this regime change and stuff, I felt like there was a bit of commentary. I'm not very elegant in my analysis of the how it actually relates to either country, but I felt like it was telling to me more or less the timing that this came out at, that this was on Armando Iannucci's mind, that this is, again, it was probably in development right around the time of the 2016 election and Brexit, and that these were sort of a commentary on how, politics are both funny and scary at the same time.
Man, well said. Really well said. I thought tie that into what Matt was saying about how at the end they're just kind of doing the same thing. They're rushing a process and they're killing a man, maybe a bad man, but they're still doing the same thing. They're behaving in similar ways to all their predecessors, and that's a moment where change is possible. But if you choose that same path, then once again, I think you're just setting that. I mean, not that things can't be thought over again and changed, but I think it's a critical point that we do recognize in history there have been things like this that happen, and we can kind of see how they may have got there. Whether their reports are truthful or not, we can't know for sure, but we might be able to see how they got there. And if we continue to if we on our turn make similar choices, then we know what to expect. I think it's really beautiful what they're telling with this story, but it's a hard change to make.
Yeah, I think that, so obviously the whole story is about who's going to be in charge, and this idea, I think, connecting it a little bit, Brian, to what you were saying on some levels, like we make it so much about a personality, and whether that's the person themselves, I need to be elected, I need to be in power, and even the things that are talked about in the film that, it's a new day for Russia. We can do this. These kinds of things that are communicated throughout the film, because I'm going to be in charge, because it's going to be me. It's not going to be them. It's going to be me. But fundamentally, it has nothing to do with really who. It's how we're actually choosing to function and go about things. And I would say that there is probably some deep connection to the US or the UK on maybe it's not as much about who, it's how we're actually choosing to go about these things as a country and a society and a culture, and treat one another and all of those kinds of things. Like that matters. And that's actually what the new day or the new thing potentially should be or could be. I'm not necessarily preaching that message. I'm just saying, like, I think that's a strong narrative potentially, Brian, that like you kind of highlighted in what you said. I like that. So I think that's good. So for me, I which kind of ties into what we were talking about as well. I think this film does a great job of kind of communicating around that idea of just towing the party line, no matter what, for fear of loss of power or loss of leadership, or having people come after you because you didn't toe the party line, or you said this one thing. Go back to Buscemi's niece, taking piano lessons. Like, you want to do everything you can to always stay in the party's favor. And it becomes more about that than it does actually doing the right thing or any of those kinds of things. And this film satirically and hilariously at times kind of points at that. Like, here are all these guys that are trying to do things right by the party, and it's just ridiculous. And it's like, just stop. Like, who's going to be the first person to stop and say, like, no, we don't need to play this game anymore. But just that made up pretend game that everybody's playing, which I think is the beauty of political satire on a lot of levels. It's the beauty of Veep on a lot of levels. It's continuing to just highlight the silliness of this game that we're playing on some levels. It's like, we don't have to play this game. Like, we can actually have real conversations and try to move things forward, but we're playing this game, continually.
That's powerful, man. That's I think that's a good insight. I mean, especially having just come through the whole political thing that our country's trying to be patient with. I think watching the impeachment trial was like for me, like, wow, if it was people on other sides, they would be arguing the same thing. Like, this is the kind of thing. This is towing party lines. This is just a rehearsal or a performance in a way. And not saying that's right or wrong, but if we see it as individuals, I think it does open our eyes to something, as satire does. It opens our eyes to maybe think a new thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to the potential silliness of what's happening. Yeah,
totally. Silliness, I think, is a great word for it. It sounds like it should be a more a meaner word, what we witnessed, but it does feel silly sometimes.
Sure. Yeah.
And that, I mean, definitely Death to Stalin, or the Death of Stalin was silly in a lot of ways. I mean, and I'm thankful for it. I'm going to go to bed happier tonight. I haven't watched that today. I really am.
Good. The only other thing that I would throw out that and it's more the beginning of the film with the concerto thing. And I don't think this is what the film means, but it was a kind of a deeper connection with something that I really enjoyed was, Stalin, he makes the phone call, he wants a recording, and just that whole interaction with the director of that performance. And, like, what time did he call? So he said 17 minutes. So is that from here or is that from now? And like, just that anxiety and pressure of, here's someone I respect, even not even, like, I'm going to die if I do it wrong, but just someone I respect. And I got to get this right. I got to do this right. And just all of that anxiety and build up. I thought the film did just a beautiful job at pointing at, like, and I know I'm reading way too much into this, as I do most things in life, but like, Stalin just made a phone call on a whim. Like, I'd really like a recording of that. And that's all it was. And here, because of that one phone call, literally hundreds of people's lives are now shifted and changed. And, there's this anxiety and pressure and all this stuff. And just the reality of what, whatever word you want to put on it, leadership, let's say that leadership can put on other people, that there's just this whim of like, I'd really like that. And the way that things can so quickly turn, and the anxiety, because I've lived under that anxiety for other people or bosses, or, that I'm like, I got to get this right, and Brian,
Did you work at Art House?
I'm trying to give you both, as Art House employees, whether previously or currently, to just come out and say, Matt, stop it.
No, that's good.
So anyways, I just really, for whatever reason, connected with that of like, oh yeah, this happens, and it happens way too often.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. And hopefully less and less as we get older and older. I don't know.
For sure. So, gentlemen, as we wrap this thing up, is there anything that you would point to that you would say, if you want to go deeper or want to understand more? The only thing I would highlight would be the studying that Tyler Murphy's already doing, reading the internet and understanding history. Because there is a lot of historical connections to this.
And for me, like, I mean, even after watching this film, like, I understand mostly that Stalin was a bad guy, but I felt like my high school history didn't fully cover that part of history, that we basically went from World War II to JFK, and we didn't really spend a whole lot of time with, post-World War II Russia and the atrocities that happened there. So, I mean, just some basic Wikipedia articles. This film is based on a French graphic novel, so if you want to seek that out, you can, maybe get a little bit better understanding with that as well. And then I'd also just recommend other Iannucci things like The Thick of It and Veep, just to again, he's very attuned to political satire, and the thick of it, I remember giving an attempt to maybe 10 years ago, and it didn't really hit me as much as Veep, because I can understand American politics. I don't understand British politics enough, but they're definitely very similar in their satire. So.
And I think Veep, the first few seasons, if not all of them, are streaming on Amazon Prime for free.
I believe so. Sure. Yeah. I mean HBO if you got it, but I believe it's all on Amazon now as well.
Yeah. That would be another one, Ryan, not to watch around your kids. Just forewarn you there, buddy.
I'll learn.
Why is that lady so mad and saying so many things?
Yeah, that's true. She does get awfully mad in that one.
Yeah. Anything for you, Ryan, that you'd point at? I was just going deeper.
I think that your audience would probably already have this in hand, but the idea that whoever's being teased about, or whoever's being made fun of in the satire, isn't really what the story's about. And I think you can only get that by, I mean, it was about him, but truthfully, it was about the atrocities that those people had to live through under his rule. And there's just I don't know. For me, I get sensitive about the way people talk about Russians, because, just because I'm married to one and our kids are half Russian. And I don't think that your audience is this way, but for me, being in Russia was the biggest eye-opener to anything about Russian history because I was there on May 9th, which is Victory Over Germany Day. And we witnessed their ceremonial celebration of that. And to understand that how many people died, and they say like 40 million maybe can be attributed to Stalin. And that wasn't World War II, but it was like 25 million is what they give them credit for in World War II or something like that. It's a lot of people.
And it's easy to forget how much longer they were fighting before the U.S. even got involved.
Yeah. And I haven't done all the historical diving that I probably should. But just knowing some Russians and seeing them and knowing what they've gone through in a really small way, I think helped me with this movie just understand some of the intricacies that I think the director knew of. And I think we already alluded to the peasants coming into the concerto, and I think that was the scene that really kind of described a lot of it for me. But I think that was, and Matt, you picked up on that already, but that was a lot about for me, it was about having been in Russia and having seen quite a few people that have been through those times. Oh, sorry. Well, yeah,
you're good.
It's a long-winded answer, and one that could have been much shorter. I think a deep dive is as far as you want to go. Dive as deep as you can, and share your story on this. Share your thoughts on this movie with others, because that's how we're going to dive deep as well.
Awesome. All right. Well, without Matt, I'll do closings here.
I'm back.
Hey, he's back.
Sorry, everybody.
Back. So I'll let Matt do the closings then.
Well, thank you, Ryan. I'm not sure what I missed, but I want to say thank you so much for one, giving us a tour of your home. It's lovely.
Yep. Thanks.
Two, for just being the human being that you are in Billings, Montana, and doing all the work that you're doing. So not only is Ryan,
thank you.
I hope everybody continues to know how instrumental Ryan Caberry is to this thing called Art House in Billings, Montana. And then from there, he's gone on to be instrumental to this thing called the Mint Film Festival, which is another giant thing happening in Billings. So Ryan Caberry continuing to do great things for our community. So thank you, sir.
Well, Matt, thanks for having me on, and I'm excited to get back out and watch movies with each and every one of you and your patrons. So here's to Art House and getting those doors open as soon as possible. Thanks to you too, Brian. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
So appreciate it. Okay, thank you so much for those of you that tuned in.
Before we got a couple minutes left. Number one, Art House at Home. We've got The Booksellers coming this Friday. Documentary about the rare book scene in New York City and a little bit about independent bookshops out there, and really kind of a love letter to books. So be sure to check that one out starting on Friday. And also probably Another more important thing is that this Tuesday is going to be a very special Giving Tuesday for COVID-19. We are participating in that. So this Tuesday, May 5th, look for us on Facebook, go to our website. That is when we are doing our special Giving Tuesday. And if there is any chance that you can give for that, that is greatly appreciated. Not even just for us, but for any organization that you support. It's a great day to support these organizations that are struggling right now.
Amen.
Thank you, Brian. I love it.
Yep.
Everybody, I hope you're safe. I hope you're well. And we, as Ryan said, hope to see you very, very soon, as it looks like things are starting to slowly open up. Make sure to follow along on any of our social media or head to arthousebillings.com, as we will keep you up to date with our reopening plans as they become clearer and clearer in the weeks ahead. Other than that, have a great night. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.